I'm going to talk about a few artists that are listed under the artist references. And I'm going to talk about them looking at some of the principles of design that we've been looking at so far in your reading. So this is an artist, Hannah Hawk, is a German artist that was working in the early 19th century. So you can see these two compositions here that were done by Collage. One of the things I want to look at is she uses positive and negative space. She limits the image so that you do see a lot of the background or the negative space. So if I take my little blue dot here, you could kind of see some of this negative space in here and then over here. And here you can see it divided up into thirds. So this is one third, and then this is the second third, with the image being in the central third of this area. So we look at this composition over here. These legs dangling down really break up this space and make it very interesting. The theme here, you can kind of see this young woman in a swimsuit with these mismatched shoes. She was working in the 1920s. So this hat, which you see, which would have been real typical of the high-end German society, also kind of resembles a bathing cap from that time frame also. Her little tinkle bell little fairy person here off to the side, but with this the African mask put on it with these kind of wings that have been all collaged together. So you can see these are all separate images. These dangling legs here return up here. So that's an idea of repetition between these legs here, and these legs here. Notice the proximity, how close some of these objects are to each other, and the distance that these objects have from each other. So that's proximity. Continuity is where this shoulder or this form that we see right here is disturbed or disrupted by the figure, but we know the form continues underneath. So let's look at the next artist, Romar Bearden, who is an African-American artist born in the early 19th century. He served in World War II, and he was very active artist in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So dealing with issues of race in America in a very turbulent time in our history, the 1960s, which we're still kind of dealing with today. But he was, if you look at his collages, and he's very famous for the collages, one of the things he does here is this tremendous change in scale. So you can see this very large head right here, these kind of heads that belong on the figures here, except this one that's a little over large. So he's changing the scale of some of these heads. I love this arm right here, how it blows up and this hand gets huge in comparison to everything else. So he's playing with several different things here. Notice his edges, how they work within this composition. They're not sloppy or rough, but they add to the composition. Why aren't they sloppy or rough? I'll be pointing this out when I grade your pieces, because we see it here, we see it here, we see it here, and we see it here. So he uses these edges throughout the composition and turns it into something. Another piece by Romar Bearden. You can see the scale of the heads, how he's playing with some of that proportion here. Very dense imagery, like every space is used, as opposed to Hannah Hawk. The background is very vibrant and very complex. So that would be Hannah Hawk is using what's called limitation, and he's using a very dense pictorial style, also called horror vacuuming, which we'll get to later. A couple graffiti artists who, while their pieces aren't collage per se, their imagery is developed by collage. Artist Mr. Brainwash, who's a French artist, spacing on the name right now, but this was made out of three separate images: the Superman, Barack Obama, and the American flag in the background here. So he put those three images together to create this image. Bansky, another graffiti artist, this is actually painted on the wall. He uses stencils to create this image. But the image you see is this caveman type image that he may have pulled from some source. But then this is a fairly common image to us in the world of advertising right here, this it looks like certainly something you'd get at McDonald's or something like that. So pulling that imagery together, notice the background of the building is used within this composition. The size and the scale of him, the closeness to these, and notice this space over here is very similar to this space over here, repeating that space. Next artist is Shepard Fairey, another graffiti artist also. You could very much see the collage aspect of his artwork. Notice the background isn't just a background. You can see some text like newsprint, perhaps some money here, and some other types. Notice the lettering. It isn't really hard edged. It's kind of weathered and built into the background like it comes from the background. Very similar thing here. Very political in his content, which is more, you can see it as more contemporary political comment. And the same thing with these two artists. They're working with more contemporary content. So I hope this kind of gives you some clues into collage, which you'll be working on next week.